Russia is rolling out the cope as the head of Russia's central bank refuses to call what's happening in Russia a recession, instead using some strange terms. But is the Russian economic lifeline in the form of China also turning out to be a nothing burger? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Hit subscribe. Let's talk about it. So the Russian economy has slipped into, listen to this one, technical stagnation, according to a Russian bank CEO, which is, of course, a very, very obfuscating term. Now, the reason this is so strange is because, well, Vladimir Putin had said to the Russian public, he said, I won't let Russia slip into a recession. And so the Russian economy, though, is in recession. You can't simply spend massively on your military, kill off 1 million workers, and then expect your economy not to have any kind of meaningful impacts. And reality is catching up to the Russian economy, as it is almost certainly in recession, right? Growth has stalled and begin to actually, well, recede. But the key is to make sure that Vladimir Putin is always right all of the time. That is how you survive in Russia and avoid being pushed out of a window. So to avoid being pushed out of a window, the bank has simply decided to rename it. It's not a recession. It's a technical stagnation. This is, of course, speaking at the Eastern European Economic Forum. Graf said that July and August data suggested growth was now approaching zero, right? He says, don't worry, the interest rate will be just 14% by year end. Is it enough for our economy to start recovering, he asks. In our view, it is not. Given the current level of inflation, recovery can only be expected when the rate is 12% or lower. Yeah, this is a sign, too, that, again, Russia is really running into two terrible places. The first is, of course, imagine if the Fed hiked our interest rates in the U.S. to 14%. It would mean that there was a runaway inflationary crisis. And if you had that level of inflation and you had growth at zero, you would be talking about a stagflation crisis. And this is what you get when you start to ruin an economy with something like a massive militarization. Because one estimate is that up to a third of government spending in Russia is driven by the war. So remember, for every person who is employed, say, making drones in a drone factory, remember, they have a whole family and a whole set of consumption around them that's also effectively a class, a secondary, it depends economically in a secondary sense on war spending. So you're talking about a huge portion of the Russian economy now that is driven by this war spending. But ultimately, like a healthy economy, you produce goods and services that provide value to people. And in turn, that value drives more inputs. So, for example, if you, let's say you build a bridge, you're a construction worker and you build a bridge. Well, that bridge allows people to get to work faster. They're able to, or for example, goods and services are delivered from one town to another 10%, 20% faster than they would otherwise be. It means that both towns can have a growing, thriving economy because, well, they're getting more goods and services faster and cheaper. And so that is how economies grow, because it's a virtuous cycle, right? The baker in one town can now sell his bread in two towns because of that bridge, right? And he is able to build more, purchase more ovens to bake more bread and become a larger operation, right? It's how economies grow in a healthy way. The huge problem with the war economy is that it doesn't engage in productivity, right? That guy who bakes bread in town A, right? He's going to sell that bread and someone's going to eat it and get value out of it. But when you build a drone, that drone is sent to Ukraine and it's blown up in a field somewhere. And you can kind of juice an economy a little bit with this sort of stuff for a little bit of time, right? There's some instances where you can use it, for example, to subsidize industries that actually are productive, but just need a little bit of a help. Like, think like solar panels, where they said, listen, solar panels are pretty good, right? They allow people to save money on their electric bills. They can be good in a lot of states. So why don't we just give them a little tax subsidy to make it a little bit, to juice this industry a little. And so that can work, actually. It can work quite well and kind of help guide an economy. But again, there's a huge difference between, hey, we're going to pay these chip companies a little bit extra money so that they make sure they make those chips here, right? That's not the same thing as, hey, we're going to employ a third of our economy or more and we're going to do it to make drones that'll be blown up in a field somewhere, or build tanks that are just going to get smoked by a Ukrainian missile. Like, that's not economically productive. That tank doesn't do anything. It actually goes to another country, does a bunch of shit, and then blows up. It blows up stuff in that other country. War is almost the opposite of economic productivity. And so Russia is finally starting to learn this lesson, right? The economy, they said, is cooling faster than expected. New government forecast will be submitted shortly. You can see this is all just sounds like absolute cope, right? Projections are falling. Estimates are now closer to a growth rate of 1.2%. But this falling growth, again, this is Russian economic data, which should absolutely not be trusted, right? Remember, it's been classified for months. And, Putin has essentially turned to China to help him out, to try to give him economic lifelines. And in some ways they have. They've been willing to sell Russia, consumer goods and facilitate major international transactions and even provide dual use goods. But some of these most important things, particularly this sovereign loans, right? The Chinese economy or Chinese government loaning Russia making low interest loans to Russia to fund their war effort is something they really would love to see. And also, they are depending on some of these pipeline deals, right? Which, again, the Chinese have basically put the screws to Putin and said, listen, if you want us to buy your shitty sanctioned oil, you've got to give us an absolute steal. And it's been actually so exploitive that the Russians have been reluctant to do it until very, very recently. And that has not been that's not what happens. It's bad when the Chinese lifeline, the Russians still wait months and months and months and months to accept it. So, this is, I think, a sign that the Russian economy is not healthy. It's laboring under continued delusion. And the longer this goes on, the worse off it's going to be for Putin. Guys, if you appreciate my content and you want to support me and keep me independent, you can do so by subscribing at combatvetnews.com. This is functionally my Patreon or my Substack, where twice a week we drop uncensored combat videos as well as Q&As for members. A huge thank you to our Colonel tier members, guys like Henry Russier, I Just Guy called Chris Rossi, AL90, Sergey Zinchenko, D. Stewart, and all of our Lieutenant tier members. We couldn't do it without you guys. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.